So we'll go straight to the crux of the matter this evening, as we have joining us some gentlemen of no mean repute. I have on my right Pastor Ayo Okwene. He is a seasoned politician, grassroots politician at that, a businessman, the chairman and CEO of those group of companies, and also a pastor. Good evening, sir. Good to have you join us on the show.
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers.
And by my left, we have Barrister Ugoji Nwabweze, SSA Non-Indigenous Affairs, Igbo, a seasoned broadcast journalist, and the President Ohaneze Ndigbo, Cross River State Branch. Good evening, Barrister. So good to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's quickly start with, after so much would I say, a violent start to build up to the Anambra 2021 elections. We finally had it yesterday. Let me start with the President Ohaneze Ndigbo, Cross River State, Barrister Ugoji Nwabweze. What we saw as a build up to the Anambra decide was something that we felt we were in a war zone, when the police had to draft 34,000 policemen. The civil defense drafted about 20,000. What was your thought as a build-up to this? Did you think all this hula baloo was actually necessary, or it was political?
Well, the number of security operatives, drafted into Anambra State, if you put together, if they were allowed to vote, they were enough to produce the governor of that state. But the more you're drafting people, security people, into an electoral system, it tried to bring in a lot of pressure, like to intimidate the populace and all that. But we're happy that eventually peace reigned, and people were spoken to, and people saw reason why they should stand down and allow things to go the way it happened. Just like as I was telling Pastor, when we're sitting there, what happened in Anambra, the fact that we were able to organize that election, because it was near impossibility. Everybody concluded that it was not going to happen, that there won't be election. To the extent that some people started saying, look, if we don't see voters in Anambra State, we're going to open our prisons, and allow the inmates to come and vote, that they have a constitutional right in the situation of crisis like that to draft them in to come and vote. But we saw a situation where at the dying minutes, all the parties were creating tension leading to the Anambra State Guba election. They had to stand down, and eventually peace reigned. So that's a precursor to all the crises we have across the country, whether it is banditry, whether it is Boko Haram, or whatever, across the regions of the state. If the people have the will, to address the issues that had created a lot of tension, a lot of crisis in this country, it will use the Anambra as a precursor, just as a litmus test to show that the fact that peace reigned in Anambra and election was conducted, it's evident of the fact that election can be organized in any other parts of this country. So I think that we have every reason to congratulate the people of Anambra. We have every reason to congratulate Nigerians who saw to the success of that election. Well, for the issue of the too many security people, I didn't think it was necessary, drafting into all manner, or there's no one wearing uniform, who has gone, who never showed up in Anambra election. And that level of gangsterism, what I call it, had predated even the Anambra election. It happened in other places where those elections had happened in that. And it intimidates the populace, even makes them not to come out. So when you talk about apathy, that is one of it. That level of intimidation, it's enough to allow the people not to come out a lot at all. So that's my opinion.
Okay, so Pastor Yo, let's also get your thought on this. We saw what happened in Edo. Edo also had a very, what we'll say, a very crazy build-up to the Edo 2020 elections. The same too in Ondo. And Anambra was kind of out of the way entirely. But as a grassroots politician, when we see violence build up to big events, do you think it's been an invisible hand or they're just mere agitations?
Well, thank you very much, Joseph. My concern with the build-up to the Anambra election was that the security presence, like my brother said, was completely unnecessary. And when IPOB suspended their sit at home, it made me know that there is some sense in that organization. That all those that have been calling IPOB terrorist organization, the IPOB is not a terrorist organization. They are just people interested in agitation for home state. But having said that, I think that the way the security operatives were drafted to Anambra was absolutely unnecessary. It created tension. I believe that that's why there's still some voter apathy that could be observed, and it's because of that overture. I mean, it was just too much. And having said that also, I want to commend the Anambra people for doing what they did, coming out. All the parties showed up. And whoever wins, you will agree with me that there is a fair contest. Though we have heard reports from selected skirmishes here and there, but in the whole, it's going to be a very successful outing for INEC and for Anambra people. But my concern also is with INEC. And I'm happy that INEC had deployed their new technology for the election. And I'm happy that they have used it and have tested in Anambra, and it's not working. The delays that were caused, that they had to extend voting to Sunday, is something that INEC has to go back to their drawing board. We applauded them in the use of technology, but I think the technology is causing more harm than good. So I think that INEC has to work again and see to it that they brush up, because in today's world we need technology for elections to work perfectly.
Okay, Barrister, from the last point that Pastor Yopone raised, that we need technology. Now, as a build-up to this election, we saw a lot of violence. Now, moving forward, before we get into to discuss the election, moving forward, what would be, do we see INEC going more into online voting? Because when we have violent area, prior to this time, IPOB had declared sit at home. So with the online voting put in place, anyone can sit anywhere and do the voting. Do you see that happening maybe in the nearest future, coming from INEC?
Yeah, just like Pastor said, we've reached a level where our nation will be driven by technology. In fact, technology is the end thing. If you look at everywhere, you have the BVN, you have the NIN, you have your bank alerts, you have, so virtually, our system, has widened up, the horizon is opening up, for technology. And I think that it has reached a level where our electoral system needs to be driven by technology. But the thing is that our client, the question is it ripe enough, given the facts, looking at the issue of power, looking at the issue of the manpower development to handle all that. So what happened in Anambra to the point where the system failed, and even the politicians themselves are beginning to blame INEC, for deploying facilities that couldn't work. And these were part of the reasons why the election were also deferred, to today, where the election also had to proceed against yesterday, where the election ought to have ended at a certain time. So the question is, for me, if we adopt a very credible system of government, where from the ward to the local government and all that, you have a fair electoral system, just as it is now, where after the election results are announced, people sit by, protect their results, and those results are actually announced. So for me, those transmission of results and all that become for me perfunctory. It's more like just how do I put it? A ceremony. Because for the contestants now, the 18 contestants who took part in the Anambra election, going by what I've said, where there is credibility at the ward and all that, the polling units, each of the polling units giving a credible election and declaring the election at that point, those results actually are transmitted either by individuals. It doesn't really mean that what we're saying that when they come and announce the results, it becomes, like I said, perfunctory, it becomes more like a social event. But at home, all the candidates would have had the results as given from the wards, the local government, and up to the state. So you have an idea to make a comparative analysis as to where I am standing now, what my votes, what are my strengths, have I lost, and also you can give a fair assessment as to where you are standing in the election. So, but be that as it may, we have reached a level where, given the threat by IPOB and all that, like if they had insisted on the Anambra election, if they didn't stand down, nobody would have predicted what would have happened in Anambra State. So we must begin to look beyond the Anambra. Suppose in future, either one region, one of these people in the region say no, don't conduct election in our this thing. So that's why we begin to think about technology and all that, and to see whether we can do online voting. But we must culture ourselves. First of all, we need to clean up our system, because our inclinations as politicians and all that are towards evil. So when you are not very careful, every system that is perfected in Nigeria to enhance a particular system and an organization, other people are finding a way to subvert it. So that's where I think that from what he has said, technology is very important in our electoral system, and we must begin to think about it as a driving force for our future electoral system.
Okay, let me quickly take us through a list of Anambra governors since 1999. Our dear viewer, you would be amazed that Anambra State alone has had governors more than Nigeria has presidents since 1999. 1999, we had Chinwoke Mbadinuju, and he ended his tenure in 2003. Then Chris Ngige came in 9 May from the PDP 2003 and stayed till 2006. Then Virginia Etiaba, who was the first female governor in Nigeria, came in, and Peter Obi also came on from the Abga family, the very first governor from Abga in 2006 through 2014. Then the current governor, Willie Obiano, came in on the 17th of March 2014. Till date is running off his second tenure. Let's look at Anambra. Anambra has political heavyweights. So you hardly find someone who wants to shift ground. But let's look at the three major political parties: the Andy Uba of the APC, Abga Charles Soludo, former CBN boss, and the PDP Valentine Ozigbo. Three heavyweights politically. Let's look at these people. What could be their pedigree in leading a very dynamic state like Anambra, where we have people so rich, big industrialists, great politicians in that state? Let's look at the pair of these three major musketeers.
Yes, I think that the leading political parties in the Anambra election have the cream of the candidates. Starting from Soludo, Professor Soludo, Andy Uba, and of course Valentine Ozigbo. These are all people that have been tested in their industry. But I still have a problem with Anambra electorates, because it's not, democracy as we have it is not really deep. because you still have a lot of people that are not interested. So you have we need the APGA, PDP, PC. They must look for a way to deepen democracy, taking it further to the grassroots, so that the normal other people can show up. Now, in Anambra, you need to be very important before you come out. And I am happy for one thing, that Anambra State has had good leaders, especially starting from Peter Obi.
Peter Obi, yes.
Yeah. And he has developed the area. I do not, the jury is still out on Willie Obiano's tenure. We cannot say for sure yet how he has performed. But those candidates have really helped. But my problem with APGA as a party is their inability to go beyond government in Anambra State.
Okay.
If you look at the House of Representatives, how many APGA candidates, how many APGA people do you have sitting in the House of Representatives? How many APGA people do you have sitting in the Senate? That means there is still a lot of work to be done. In Nigeria, we still have a situation where people come out for governorship that have not been tested in other fields. I mean, how APGA faring in the House of Assembly and all of that. This is the problem with democracy in Nigeria. We go for the plum of the job. Everybody goes for government house. Everybody goes for the presidency. You have the youth, the likes of Shewore, that has not tested himself in his local government, not tested himself in his house. He wants to be president. This is the problem, and I see that play out in APGA. APGA has become a spiritual party of Anambra, but I really wish, for the sake of democracy, they could traverse the entire East, so that people would take that block more seriously. But in other areas, they are still fragmented. There are people that are still working, the campaign to APC, to PDP, and all of that. APGA is a phenomenon in Anambra. But I really wish, for the sake of party politics in Nigeria, they can expand and have, Bryce Ogoji could run for office in Calabar, in the House of Assembly, or local government, for APGA or something. If we can have that, even in Lagos, people will begin to take that party more seriously. But up till now, I do not see that. In the Senate, we have APC,
PDP,
PDP,
YPP.
It doesn't paint a good picture of the party. So I think the people of Anambra must internalize it. If they want to go with APGA, they take it seriously so they can export the party to other climes.
Barrister, I would love you to react to that, looking at how to break out of regional political party inclination, because it appears that APGA, like he said, of which we all, it's Anambra. How can we take it beyond the Anambra shores, take it to the southeastern part of Nigeria, at least for a start, before it breaks into other part of Nigeria?
Well, Igbos have a record by virtue of the fact that they are mercantile in nature, and so they become extremely very difficult to put them together in terms of governance. So that is what you see playing out in Anambra State, particularly, when the people are armed with liquid cash, So for them, it doesn't matter. If you see an average Igbo boy who probably have 1 million naira in his account, if you talk to him the way he doesn't like, he will ask you, do I feed from your house? And when he asks that question, it means that he has asserted himself. So it becomes difficult to control such a person. Now, not to talk of a larger society like Anambra State, where when you begin to say, let's see the first 10 people who could be billionaires, you see them stretching to Atimbo,
Yes.
It becomes very uncomfortable and uncountable. You talk about millionaires, you see them stretching. And when you go to other climes in other states, you find scarcity of such persons. So that's exactly what happened. If you look at the three major contestants, in the Abga election, there are people who have carved a niche in their various areas. If you look at the YPP or the other.
Okay, and
So he has, made his mark in governance over a period of time, even though during the runoff of the campaign, there were very uncomplimentary remarks that he was more like a houseboy or a shoemaker for the president. But, one of my brothers said, look, she's a chief, even if it is chief cook, so he's a chief, So having been the last person the president will see and the first person the president sees, it's a plus. And that had given him the muscles which he's been trying to pull in the last few years to govern Anambra State. I look at Charles Toludo. He has risen to the apex of handling the economy of the state and of the country and being the governor of Central Bank. You look at the man in PDP. He has also risen to the level of being, I think, the deputy governor of Central Bank. So these are people who are not going to rely on anybody for funding of that dream of becoming the governor of the state. So they can call the shots. They have this thing. So what had played out in Anambra, in spite of the various problems had to do with the voting, voters buying, and all that, they had actually shown that Anambra has people, who can change the face of the politics in this country. Not that because if you have the money, if you have the money. Yesterday we attended a workshop. We were talking about, political power is no longer in vogue because it doesn't last. But if you have influence, then you can exert power. And if you have money, you can influence a lot of things. In fact, the politicians will be running to your house. So just like he said, so with the kind of billionaires we have in Anambra, they can contribute effectively into saying, look, we are going to sponsor this man to become the president of this country. Or we are going to put so and so money to enlarge ABGA. But the problem of ABGA is self-inflicted. It has to do with either internal leadership and all that. Sometimes those who are in position of extending that vision, which Pastor has said, are bedeviled with greed, pursuit of greed, pursuit of personal aggrandizement and all that. So that is what happened. We in Imo State had the opportunity of producing ABGA. Of course, you know how the thing started when we had Ojus Okalo started a PPA. And there was a spillover to Imo State. So we thought that when Ojukwu came up and established ABGA, it had the power, the potentials of holding the entire East. Because that is the kind of politics we're playing now had been regionalized. If you look at APC, the Southwest are taking APC. Look at PDP, then, the North took it now, but when it changed to APC, you know that the North, anything about APC goes there. So the Igbos have nothing to hang on to. So it's a symbol of their authority. Or just like he said, communal party, where people can say, this is ours, and all that. So that is that kind of emotion that was evoked during this last election. So I think that it is now time for them to say, okay, let us look beyond Anambra. Just like he said, let's see whether we can form a regional bloc, under this umbrella of ABGA. And from there, you can begin to extend the powers of the monies and all that, into various regions and into the federal. Because the truth is that most of those evil politicians have the war chest, have enormous resources to prosecute presidential election.
Okay, well, let's quickly go on a very short break. When we are back, we'll continue with our talk. It's here, the Weekend Politics. Don't go away. All right, glad to have you back. It's still the Weekend Politics, and with me here is Pastor Eyo Okwene, a grassroots politician, businessman, and a cleric. Also, we have Barrister Ogoji Nwabweze, SSA, to the Governor on Non-Indigenous Affairs, Igbo, a seasoned broadcast journalist, and President Ohaneze Ndigbo, Cross-State Branch. Let me come over to you now. As a grassroots politician, you've seen series of defections in your political party. From 1999 to now, you agree with me that some have defected. Now, why I'm trying to draw that analogy is, as a build-up to the elections yesterday, we saw a lot of people leaving APGA, even to the height of the deputy governor leaving APGA for APC. What was your thinking as a politician? Because it was so fierce, it appeared that APGA was going to lose, so to say, but what we just saw in the coalition, about 12 local governments so far out of the 21, the APGA is leading. So as a grassroots politician, all of those defections, do you think it had anything to either weaken the camp of the APGA members?
Well, the politics in Nigeria is very fickle. That's why you see people moving from one party to another. And it worries me as a person. And it tells me that our democracy is still developing. And people have not gotten the memo that we need to sit and build every party. Now, the issue of defection prior to elections is something that has become so endemic in Nigerian politics. And I think that we need to take a second look at it. Because if you leave one party because there's a disagreement, who is going to fix that problem? Okay? I belong to the PDP, and people have asked me questions, why have I not moved? Or I said, I'm in PDP because I'm using myself as an example. Because I want to win power. I love the party. Because the PDP is still a national party. Okay? So for me, it's comfortable. We're in power or out of power. So I like that. But now, when people begin to move, they weaken their bases, they lose credibility. You see greed being played out. You see desperation being played out. And all of these makes politics look very fickle. So when the deputy governor of Anambra State decamped from APGA to another party, I was like, what is he trying to prove? You know, he's thinking of himself post 2021. So that's the problem we have. And we have that everywhere. Ogoji tried to mention some issues of internal crisis in APGA, greed complex, and all of that. These are things that are playing out in every part of the country. People want to hold on to power for as long as they can, do whatever it takes to hold on to power. And it's not helping our democracy, truly.
Barrister Nwabweze, this question, because I have to direct it to you as a legal entity. Let's look at a few electoral offenses that we saw. One was the snatching of ballot box. Two was the vote buying, issue of vote buying. And there is another one we saw, the deputy governor, who after Tom printing, he had to display his ballot paper to the press. Let's look at all of that. But let's start with that of the deputy governor. Was that an electoral offense to show your ballot paper? It was also be something of secret.
Well, just like you said, greed plays a very important part in some of this decamping and all that. For me, I've been wondering, and I want to find out exactly what did they tell the people who decamped. You know, because APGA was in control of Anambra State, you know, and suddenly there was this level of hush, you know, disintegration. People started flying out like a boat that they found sinking. You know, people started looking for safety valves and all that, you know. So I've been wondering, what did they tell them that gave that impetus? People were just
Leaving.
showing that level of impunity and audacity and all that. The deputy governor just left, and members of the House of Assembly and all that. So predictions were very, very okay. That Aga had lost the election. But in terms of showing his vote, people had asked that question, and I'm also at loss. But that shows that he had a deal. He entered into a deal. That, look, you must, when you come out, this is what you must do. And of course, you know how tense the security issues there. If you didn't show them, look, I have fulfilled my own side of
the bargain.
The bargain. So don't come after me. I have done what you have asked me to do. I have become, I have voted. So I have. So whether you win or whatever, that's not my business. I have done. So it goes a lot to talk about the testimony of the individual. It's no longer about politics. There are people who had played politics and had shown some level of credibility, to their image. But my major problem with our politicians from 1999 down is that the parties who have had not been able to be anchored on the basis of ideology. Remember 1980, 79, 80, you have parties formed on the basis of ideology. So each party, tried to represent that ideology. So it was difficult for people to move because this ideology doesn't fit into this, it doesn't fit into this. So, but what you have in since 1999 to here is just a conglomeration of individuals who actually didn't have any ideology and they didn't fit into themselves. So that is why you can move from this party and you didn't see any difference. If it were from 1979 and all that, if you move from PRP into MPP or MPN,
yeah.
You will find it difficult to fit in because the ideology on the basis with which you found yourself in the other party didn't fit into this one. But what we see now since 1999 down is that no ideology. So you move in here, you're free. The differences weren't very clear. So, but what the governor of Anambra, the deputy governor did for me, I wouldn't talk about law. It's morally, condemnable, morally wrong. It's a testimony that has a question mark and it has questions to answer, particularly to the public that issued that mandate. For me, is the height of disappointment. But when you go to other areas like vote buying and all that, like vote buying, like I said, it's a very critical element even in our electoral act. It has been criminalized. Snatching of ballot boxes. So, but we treat those criminal issues with kid's glove because those who are supposed to enforce those criminal acts, are the same people who trigger off those criminal acts, for the purposes of protecting the interest. He mentioned the issue about self-interest, preserving self-interest. That's exactly what is playing on. So if you know that it is wrong to buy votes, because if you buy the votes of individual, you have put pressure on that person, to change his thinking. You have put pressure on him not to vote the right person. And a credible electoral system is meant to provide a credible leader. Because that system, if it is credible, it will throw up a credible leader who now will be more concerned about being accountable to the people. But when those things happen, you buy the votes and all that, you're not accountable to anybody. So that is why you see some of our politicians, the way they behave in governance shows that they are not responsible to anybody. But we are getting to the level where at a certain point, we are beginning to think about, a credible electoral system as a panacea for our credible elections.
Excellent.
You know.
Okay. Pastor Yokwede, let's look at this issue. We saw a drama this afternoon at the Collation Center when one of the returning officers, particular Dr. Michael Otu from the Village of Calabar here, when he stood up to say that he signed that result under duress. And he was even trying to blame the electoral officer of that particular local government. And we could see the drama that ensued between both of them. We saw the same thing too in a particular local government in 2019 election, where a professor came out to say he signed that under duress. Look at all of this. As a politician, a man of that caliber, been, according to him, signing a result under duress. Let's look at it. We've seen what happened in Imo State, where the man who came forth is now the current governor. Do we look at, without, I try to sound a bit, maybe sounding as if Abga has won it, but do you think that the people of Anambra State would not have the same treatment that was meted out in Imo, where the court had to upturn the entire process and give the winning to a man who came forth, and that is Hope Uzodimma?
Well, right now, I don't want to disparage the legal system, but in matters of election, we have come to see that it's cash and carry. You know, that's what I think. You know, and parties actually invest in courts because they will get there eventually. Yes, the issue of signed election under duress is something that has happened because in different small enclaves, polling units, a group of thugs can come to somebody and say, you must sign this. And the guy has to sign it for the sake of his life, you know. But what he did now was to come and announce it that this thing, I did it because I was pressured, you know. Now, what I hope will happen is it should be interrogated. Who pressured you? And were there witnesses and all of that? These are the things that lawyers will begin to feed from, you know, as the matter goes on. We now know that when people, as people are voting now, lawyers are getting ready. Not you, sir. They are looking at loopholes. They are looking at ways they can, if they lose at the polls, they can win in the courts. So it's a sad commentary to our legal system.
Okay, let me quickly come to Barrister George Nwabweze as we do a wrap on this. Let's look at rebuilding Anambra State. Early next year, His Excellency Willie Obiano would be leaving for whoever would win this election. Let's look at rebuilding Anambra and the lessons learned from this election for Nigeria 2023 elections.
Yeah, earlier on I had said Anambra election is more like a precursor to what 2023 will happen. I think there's so much to learn from Anambra, particularly for INEC. It has to put its house to order and begin to enforce relevant laws, that have already been provided in the Electoral Act. It must have that courage. The problem is that, like I said, the people who would have had the courage, to enforce the Electoral Act are the same violators, the same people who trigger off the rape on that electoral system. But we do hope that so much have been, so much issues have been thrown up, from the Anambra electoral election, particularly issue of security. The federal government had to go back to the drawing board because if the election in Anambra, where you have seen that still people are still perpetuating issue of snatching of ballot box, even when the president had issued order shoot aside, and people are still taking that risk. So you can see in more volatile areas, because I don't see Anambra as much as, what you have is non-government and all that, but there are areas in the north where people had identified themselves that they can do this and all that. So I think that federal government and INEC and everybody should go back to the drawing board and see what we can contribute to bring peace, to our various regions, so that credible elections, will be conducted. But on a party note, you've been introducing a pastor as a grassroots politician and all that. You introduced me as a politician, so you didn't assign me to any party. That shows I'm not a politician.
Okay, on this joyous note, we will be bringing the show to an end. Many thanks, Pastor Yo Bwene, grassroots politician, businessman. The pastor, thank you very much.
Politician, please look for a party.
I'll shut up for you.
I don't want to be the one to call.
I'll look for what I can bring in the middle for you.
When you're in the green room, I said something to him and he did not respond to me. I don't know which party belongs.
We will sure continue that shortly. And Barrister Ugochi Nwabwe say many thanks for your time. SSA Non-Indigenous Affairs Igbo, a seasoned broadcast journalist, and President Ohaneze Ndigbo Cross River State Branch. Gentlemen, many thanks for your time on the show. So, dear viewer, this is the size of our show this evening. Many thanks. Join us next week Sunday, God willing. Till then, do the right thing. My name is Joseph Ian. Good evening.